Every few months, I have to make a different version of the same basic video because I gain a bunch of new viewers, many of whom don't understand why I reject logical consistency as the ultimate measure of the truthfulness of an idea. The point that I'm trying to convey with a provocative title like the one for this video is that logical consistency is obviously a useful tool, but it's completely useless if it's not brought into balance with vibes and intuitions. This is the reason I call people autistic so often. It's because being hyper-rational and elevating logical consistency over intuition is technically an autistic view of the world.
But in the world where we are in, one of the worst things that can happen is people say you're inconsistent. They feel like if you're inconsistent, that shows you must be wrong. But it might show that actually what you're trying to do is to balance two things that in slightly different ways, in different circumstances, are equally important, but appear to our rather simple-minded way of looking at the world like contradictions. And unfortunately, you can't get away from this. People with certain types of autism, certainly because I don't believe that autism is a simple single entity, become hyper-rationalistic and don't find it odd when they reach completely absurd conclusions.
In fact, and this is going to be a real hot take, I have yet to hear a convincing moral or legal argument as to why possession of child should be illegal. Actual child.
The argument that I was making essentially is that people are inconsistent in their moral outrage.
He really was making that argument. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is like, sometimes people are so smart they're stupid.
If you want to avoid being so smart that you're stupid, you need to have a balanced epistemological approach to the world. And I think the best balanced epistemological approach, the framework that is, was put forward by the philosophical forefather of this channel, J-Reg, in his Autizmophrenia video, which, as you'll see in a moment, is much more scientifically sound than it might first appear. In short, everyone falls somewhere on the spectrum between autism and schizophrenia, or between vertical and lateral thinking.
Autistic people tend to be better at what I call vertical thinking. These are people who can dig really deep into a subject, and the deeper they go into that subject, the more they flesh out their understanding and knowledge about a particular subject. Trains, that's the meme, right? An autistic person could know everything about trains, tell you everything you want to know about trains. The neurodivergence comes in from the fact that they can get so deep into that one subject. Vertical thinking comes at the cost of lateral thinking, i.e., lateral thinking being the ability to make connections between disparate topics. An autistic person really into trains is going to have trouble moving the conversation away from trains. That's one of the reasons we could posit autistic people have a harder time in conversation. So going from topic to topic to topic, moving laterally, that's what a conversation is. It's a series of lateral jumps. That can be difficult for an autistic person to do because they're so interested in that one topic and not so much in everything else. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the lateral thinkers. These are people who make the lateral connections. And these lateral connections can be extremely important and impactful. I mean, 99% of the time they're not. They're just crazy, and we recognize them as crazy and outcast them from society, as we should. But the 1% of the time that they are not crazy or they are onto something, they end up making a new religion, new business, new idea, new cult, whatever, you name it.
If you are one of the many autistic debate bros who watch this channel and you enjoy debates and you love logical consistency, pay attention. A key concept that you have to understand is that of the cognitive frame. A frame is a literal neural structure in your brain, and it determines how you see and think about the world.
Every word in every language is defined relative to a frame. That if you take a word like waiter, or menu, or dish, or something like that, you're going to evoke a restaurant frame. But words activate frames, and frames are ways in which you structure the world. You cannot think without frames. You cannot speak without frames being there, and those frames are physical. They're circuitry in your brain that carries out all those inferences and imposes that structure. By the way, how many frames do you have in your head? Tens of thousands. Anytime you have any institution or situation that is conventional, that you know about, you have a frame for it.
Autistic vertical thinkers are good at establishing a frame and digging deep into it using logic and logical analysis, while schizo thinkers are very good at connecting frames using vibes and intuition. We can even see in the brains of autistic people the degree to which neural connections are more clumped together in isolated frames from one another.
Interesting finding. Autism. Autism, people have been looking for what's up biologically, and the initial assumptions would be there's not going to be enough neurons in some part of the brain, or maybe too many in another. What appears to be the case so far is there's a relatively normal number of neurons in the cortex. But then some people started studying the projection profiles of neurons in the cortex of individuals with autism post-mortem, very rare to get these, and you see a power law distribution, but it's a different one. It's a steeper one. What does that mean? In the cortex of autistic individuals, way more of the connections are little local ones. There's far fewer of the long distance ones. There are way more local ones. What does that produce? Little pockets, little modules of function that are isolated from other ones.
Trains, that's the meme, right? An autistic person could know everything about trains, tell you everything you want to know about trains.
And that, in some ways, is what's going on functionally in someone with autism. There's a lack of integration of a whole bunch of these different functions there, and that's what happens when you have maybe a mutation or maybe some epigenetic something or other prenatally that changes the shape of the power law distribution.
Building on top of this, it's incredibly important to know that the things that connect frames in your brain together are technically metaphors. And I don't mean that in some abstract way. I mean the literal neural circuits that connect frame to frame are metaphors.
And then you have a huge numbers of metaphors. So what's a metaphor? Metaphor is a map from frame to frame or schema to schema. And what you're learning as they both active, you get spreading activation that goes through the rest of the brain, finds the shortest circuit between them, and that forms a circuit. That circuit is the metaphor. So again, I pour more water in the glass, the level goes up every time, more is up, less is down, and we have a metaphor, more is up, less is down, prices rise or fall. They apply to prices, they apply to temperatures. The heat went up, turn the heat down, and so on.
Autists have trouble understanding basic metaphors that we use to structure all of our social norms. So if I say to an autist, hey, if you just go up to an ugly person on the street and say that they're ugly, that's like punching them in the face. An autist can't connect the frame of how is saying a fact the same as hitting someone. It just doesn't make sense. The problem with the online debate space, which is characterized by autistic ways of knowing, is that people will put forward a coherent frame that is based, that is a logical argument on one topic or another, but they won't contextualize the argument or they won't contextualize the logic in the broader context of the real world where people don't use logic to form their opinions.
I feel like this whole thing that Destiny introduced, where you seize frame and you never let it go, and that's what it is. Like, you understand that's like the Andrew Wilson's thing.
Of course,
is that like he is a master of the frame game.
It's hyper autistic.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You stick to the frame and you don't consider any context outside the frame.
Because the key to winning any debate is holding frame. That is, it's so easy. An LLM could do it and probably already is doing it.
The problem with irrationality, with rationality, is that it tends to fall in love with its own productions, right? And so then it comes up with a theory and it makes that a totality, and then it won't let go. So the rational mind has a totalitarian element. And we know that to some degree because that kind of rationality seems more left hemisphere focused, and the left hemisphere tends to impose structured order on the world and be updated by the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere generally updates it with negative information and with fantasy. And so the left hemisphere will impose a coherent structure on the world, which is really necessary for you to live in it. But the problem is there's a tension between coherence and completeness, and that's partly why you need two hemispheres. You need one to represent the world, and you need one to keep track of the exceptions and to feed those slowly into the representational system so that it can stay updated without collapsing into complete chaos.
Again, logical coherence is important, but it is not very good at causing people to change their minds. It is far more important for a particular ideology to gain adherents that are influential and who others seek to imitate, which is what I cover in my video on the feudal structures of cultural and mimetic power. Until next time, remember, if you are autistic, you are truly a cognitive berserker, and you have within you a great deal of potential. But you must remember, connect your frames, contextualize them in the broader world, and then join the radical enlightened centrists or something. Until next time, good luck and Godspeed.